Is it working? Is it on?
Oh man, you're going on the blooper reel.
In June 2024, I travelled with my wife to Tuscany in Italy for a very different cycling experience. This wasn't my typical riding holiday, and I was looking forward to it for completely new reasons. I'm both lucky and fortunate that my wife enjoys cycling as much as I do, so we've had many active holidays together cycling in some of the most amazing locations in the world. We have tackled many epic rides throughout Europe on our various trips, including the Italian Dolomite region with the Sella Ronda, the Italian Alps, including the mighty Stelvio Pass, the Gaiole, the Mortirolo, and the Gavia Pass. Also the French Alps, including the iconic Alpe d'Huez, monstrous Spanish climbs such as the Alto de la Cubia, the Machucos, and the Angleroo. I don't recommend the Angleroo to anyone unless you really like to suffer. Of course, also, as residents of Adelaide in Australia, we have our very own World Tour event each year in our own backyard, and we get to ride the routes of the Tour Down Under whenever we please. On our previous Euro trips, I've always been driven by the desire for status and results, trying to post my best possible time on every mountain assault, and documenting every conquest with a souvenir photo standing next to each summit sign. But last year, I had a bit of an awakening after 5 days of hard climbing in the French Alps. I was starting to think that I was overemphasizing fast times and top results, perhaps at the expense of actually enjoying the cycling. I distinctly remember at one point near the top of the Galibier, where our support van was waiting, he flagged me down to hand me my Gabba jacket. I was infuriated that my Strava time was now going to include a pointless 60-second clothing and refuel stop. Talk about having backward priorities. So when considering our next overseas biking adventure, we were looking for a change of pace, ignoring Strava segment times, maybe getting off-road, and definitely enjoying a little luxury, a little Dolce Vita. There really was only one choice: Tuscany. Although we are experienced enough riders now to self-manage a bike holiday, we really enjoy travelling with the tour group. Trek Travel had looked after us so well on our 2017 Dolomites and Italian Alps tour that we decided to go with them again on their 5-day Tuscan gravel tour. They promised top quality Trek Checkpoint SLR7 gravel bikes, luxurious rural retreat accommodation, most meals included, and a fantastic parkour, visiting Montalcino, Gaiole, Pienza, San Quirico, Siena, amongst others. Although I identify as a roadie, like many cycling fans, I have a soft spot for the Strada Bianche race, which winds its way over the limestone gravel roads of Tuscany each year, and ends with a mad dash up through Siena and into the historic and iconic Piazza del Campo. I've long been fascinated by the screen images of the peloton rolling through the Tuscan hills with the white plumes of gravel dust in their wake, passing vineyards and ancient churches and centuries-old villas with their cypress tree-lined driveways. While researching the options for a bike tour in this region, I realised just how much the romance of these images have captured my imagination. As you can see, I've brought a little drone with me. I've christened my new toy Guido. He had one little crash early on into a leafy tree, but he seems to have pulled up just fine. Let me introduce you to our tour guides, Max and Gio. Both of these chaps are absolute legends and nicer blokes you'll never meet. They could not have done more to look after us, and they made every day on the bike a stress-free breeze, besides the pedalling, of course. Every morning they had our steeds cleaned, tuned and ready to roll. The daily ride routes were pre-programmed into the supplied Garmin 1030 head units with turn-by-turn directions, so there was no getting lost. Before morning departures, we were provided with a briefing on the day's route, the various landmarks we were going to pass, of which there were many, local history and customs, and the options for varying length and difficulty of rides. We had regular snack stops on each ride from a table laid out with oat bars, M&Ms, so many M&Ms, and nuts, fruit, and electrolyte powder. The esky was always full of cold soft drinks and beer, which was an absolute necessity on these hot summer days. I'm now much better acquainted with Peroni than I was before. Another bike event in the region, which predates the Strada Bianche by some 10 years, is the Eroica. Gio explained to us that this event is a celebration of cycling history. He told us that vintage cycling wear is expected and all bikes are vintage. Steel frames, down tube shifters and narrow tyres. Given the challenge that I had negotiating some of the gravel roads with a nice modern compliant gravel bike with wide grippy tyres, I can't imagine doing it on an old school bike. The town of Gaiole in the Chianti region is the birthplace of the Eroica ride, and our tour group rolled into its town square for lunch on the second day. The giant rooster sculpture, which stands proudly at the entrance to the square, is a symbol of the Chianti region and relates to the historical victory of the famed Florentine knight, who, awoken early by the crowing of a black rooster, rode his horse into Chianti, arriving hours before his rival, who was racing from Siena, and as agreed in advance by the warring cities, therefore claimed victory and sovereignty. The Gallo Nero was thereafter adopted as a trademark for wine and produce of the Chianti region. The Chianti beer is actually pretty nice too. You can't leave Gaiole without a visit to the local Eroica bike shops, and as you can see, I've come away with just a small souvenir. The twin towers of Siena are beacons visible for miles all around Tuscany, and on day 3 we steered straight towards them. Visiting Siena was without a doubt the highlight of my cycling tour. I actually felt quite choked up with emotion as tour guide Max, my wife Vivian and I rode slowly and carefully through the city traffic along the jarring, uneven pavers, gradually up and up, and eventually arriving at the spiritual centre of the city. I recall Mathieu van der Poel's victory at the 2021 edition of the Strada Bianche, where he rode away from Julian Alaphilippe and reportedly held 1,300 watts during his initial attack on the climb through Siena. I was thrilled to be able to ride in at a more sedate pace, to marvel at the architecture, and then finally to turn the corner, dismount our bikes so as not to incur the wrath of the local police, and walk them into the mythical Piazza del Campo, where the Strada Bianche race finishes.
Oh my god. Oh, come on.
It's so good. That is so good.
It was almost a religious experience. So I said at the start that this Tuscan adventure was all about slow rides, ignoring power figures and segment times and KOMs and just enjoying the moment. Well, that lasted until day 3. As we headed towards our lunch restaurant, Max told me that there was a short, steep climb that was a nice little challenge for tour guests. As a roughly 2-minute effort, it's exactly the sort of climb that usually I'd like to have a red-hot crack at. And sure enough, as we turned onto it, we were racing. As you can see, Max is a fast and furious climber with elbows and knees flying everywhere, and I get my power down via slow twitch. Still, I'm number 3 on the leaderboard, and I've leapfrogged Gio, but I don't think that's going to last very long, will it, Gio? The ancient pilgrimage route of the Via Francigena links Northern Europe, Canterbury in England, in fact, to Rome, so that faithful Catholics can meander down to visit the Pope. Our itinerary on day 4 was a little less ambitious, but this ridgeline path with the beautiful town of Montalcino to our right provided some grand views and magnificent riding. Guido had a chance to spin his propellers this morning as we navigated through the UNESCO-listed Val d'Orcia. San Quirico was a beautiful township with its regional flags proudly on show throughout the town centre. Pienza was another gorgeous waypoint, although the climb up to its fortifications was foreboding, even from a distance, and the climb certainly taxed the legs more than a little. Gio sagely pointed out at Pienza that the weather was closing in on us. With the other riders preferring to jump in the shelter of the van, Gio simply called over his shoulder to me, "Andiamo! Let's go! It's coming!" And suddenly, for the second time in 2 days, I was again in race mode, this time racing the rain. Gio, being the ultimate gentleman and clearly the fitter of us two riders, did most of the work at the front, but I did my best to pull a few turns. This 15-kilometre stretch between Pienza and our lunch stop was entirely gravel and quite exposed to the elements. Gio was right enough to hit the gas pedal, as sure enough, the wind picked up and the rain came down. Trek Travel knows how to look after their guests. They have different levels of tour accommodation and, of course, you get what you pay for, but I am convinced of their great value and attention to detail. This was a 5-day, 4-night tour and we stayed in 2 absolutely beautiful hotel resorts. The first was the Villa Quirico resort in Castelnuovo Berendenga. From our 3rd floor room, we had views overlooking the resort's pool and right across the Tuscan countryside. The views were pretty much spectacular from every room, the terrace, the restaurant, and even the glass-walled elevator. Our tour package included social hour drinks on the first night, and evening meals at the restaurant were top quality, including glorious sunsets. The second resort was the Cabana Suites at the foot of Montalcino, an absolute oasis. The restaurant here was next level, and they had their own wine label as part of the Brunello di Montalcino DOC, and we were treated to a private tasting as an aperitivo on the final night. My tip, try their grappa. You will not be disappointed. The Cabana Suites even have their own private spa facility where you can book their sauna, steam room and spa pool for your sole use for a 1-hour block. Their outdoor infinity pool overlooks the Montalcino Valley, and even with a few drops of rain spitting down on us, we knew we were reclining in the lap of luxury. So did everything go our way? Well, not entirely. If you follow my channel, you'll know that I've reported about my hip arthritis, how I've altered my bike fit and even my bike selection to accommodate this. In particular, and very specifically, moving to the use of shorter cranks, in my case, 160 millimeters. By the end of day 4, my hips were definitely aware of the big difference between riding on smooth asphalt and the stones, rocks and ruts of the Tuscan gravel. The 3 days of sightseeing, walking around Rome and Florence prior to the bike tour starting, probably didn't help matters, but yes, I was actually quite sore by the end of the bike tour. Sore, but extremely happy. To sum up our experience, absolutely brilliant. I would not hesitate to recommend a Tuscan bike tour, and I would absolutely recommend Trek Travel as a tour operator. We're looking forward to booking a new experience with Trek Travel next year. Saluti, Max. Saluti, Gio. Saluti, Trek Travel. Saluti, Toscana.